Welcome back, my dear crime lovers. This is a new episode of the History of the American Mafia, a podcast brought to you by Fabio Fabiano and translated and read by Grace Carlisi. I do hope you enjoy this new episode. Today we're going to talk about Arnold Rothstein. The American Mafia, as we mentioned at the beginning of this series, is a hybrid composed of a Sicilian mafia from which it originates and the nascent criminal organisation in the New World, although there was a substantial difference. Unlike the Sicilian mafia, in the USA, the criminal organisations included delinquents of different nationalities, such as Irish and Jewish. The majority of the Irish organisations ended up clashing with the Sicilian or Italian ones in general, while with those of Jewish origin it was once more often a collaboration or even in some cases a murder. Some members of the Jewish criminality actively collaborate with the Italian gangs, becoming fundamental elements. The first to excel himself was, without doubt, Arnold Rothstein, even if, in his case, we certainly can't speak of an auxiliary role to Italian gangs or even of an equal. Arnold Rothstein was a Jewish-American mob boss who inspired a character in The Great Gatsby and was portrayed in the Boardwalk Empire series. He was responsible for transforming the gambling and drug-dealing rackets, perhaps even inspiring what would be known as Cosa Nostra. Arnold Rothstein had many nicknames, known as AR, Mr. Big, the Fixer, the Man Uptown, the Big Bankroll, but above all, the Brain, a nickname that clearly defined his criminal qualities. Rothstein was born in New York on January the 17th, 1882. His father was a wealthy Jewish immigrant, Abraham Rothstein, and his mother, Esther. His father was a criminal and an able businessman, from which Rothstein most likely was inspired by his way of conducting business. Rothstein was highly educated and highly skilled in mathematics. As a young man, he was supposed to take over his father's business, but soon dropped out of school to consider far more lucrative criminal pursuits. His brother became a rabbi. He worked as a travelling salesman for a while, but when he started frequenting the neighbourhood pool halls, he was drawn to the life of crime. Arnold quickly joined the criminal world through his father's connections. Rothstein's main vice, which would affect his life from early childhood until his death, was gambling. Since he was a child, he often played dice, disobeying his father. In 1921, when asked when he had become a gambler, he stated, "I have always gambled. I can't remember when I haven't. Maybe I gambled just to show my dad he couldn't tell me what to do. But that's not the only reason. I think I have gambled because I love the thrill. When I gamble, nothing else matters." Rothstein set up a smuggling organisation and several gambling rackets in the city. He also became something of a living gambling legend, making millions in winnings, so much so that he was given the nickname Big Bankroll, as he used to carry wads of $100 bills around in his pockets. It's said that he rigged the bets that led to his winning. In fact, he used to claim that he would bet on anything but the weather, as he couldn't control it. In 1916, the federal government attempted to regulate the use of drugs, such as cocaine, heroin, morphine, and other dangerous narcotics that were originally sold freely over the counter as medicines. With the new Harrison Narcotics Tax Act, the government began a policy to crack down on drug use. In 1921, these drugs were banned, and from then on, a huge black market started to satisfy the massive demand of people who used to buy these drugs previously regularly sold behind the counter. He sensed the lucrative deal and immediately got involved in what would become the illicit drug trade. Lansky and Luciano would come to leverage the vision Rothstein had provided, taking advantage of it to organize the global narcotics trade in the aftermath of Prohibition and transform local criminal gangs into the nationwide crime syndicate. In 1919, rumours had Rothstein and his associates as architects of the famous betting scandal that took place during the 1919 championship game of the Chicago White Sox baseball team, an event that would go down in history both for sports and for criminal organisation. According to some historians, Rothstein and his organisation paid some of the players of the Chicago White Sox to deliberately lose the game, on which beforehand they had placed bets on their defeat. It goes without saying, the winnings were extraordinary. This episode became known as the Black Sox Scandal and was all over America's press. Rothstein testified before a grand jury in Chicago and claimed he was an innocent and wrongly implicated, vilified businessman. Prosecutors, lacking sufficient evidence to charge Rothstein, didn't prosecute him. All the baseball players involved were permanently kicked out of the Pro League. In 1920, Rothstein, at the age of 28, moved to Manhattan. It was here that he built a casino and also invested in a horse race track in Maryland. Some scholars theorized that the building of the racecourse was a preparatory to his dishonest betting activities. Races were fixed and bet on, producing considerable winnings. Soon he became a New York millionaire. He was only 30 years of age, and it was the roaring 20s. He drove around in a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, which was then considered something of a status symbol. Arnold Rothstein was a great proponent of prohibition. In his view, it was a business opportunity, and he expanded his gambling business into bootlegging and drugs. He operated a large network of bootleggers who bought liquor into upstate New York from Canada along the Hudson River and the Great Lakes. Rothstein brought a large number of speakeasies into New York City. It was during this period that Rothstein was extremely influential in starting the criminal careers of the future mob leader Charles Luciano and his consigliere or advisor, Mayor Lansky. He taught Luciano and Lansky ways to treat crime the same way as one does business. And this influence would plant the future seeds for the creation of Cosa Nostra in the aftermath of the Castellamarese War. With his connections in the banking community and prominent role in Tammany Hall, a Democratic Party political organization, Rothstein was able to provide an important link between the two worlds. The criminal gangs served the political machine, and Rothstein saw himself as a mediator between gangs. Rothstein's early death was probably due to his lifelong gambling habit. In October 1928, at the height of his empire, Rothstein entered a high-stakes poker game. During that 3-day game, he lost over $320,000. Rothstein refused to pay the debt immediately. He hoped that by keeping the players waiting, they would accept a smaller amount. On November 4th, 1928, Rothstein was attending a meeting at Manhattan's Park Central Hotel on 7th Avenue near 55th Street. There, he was allegedly ambushed by the hands of gambler George "Hump" McManus. Rothstein was rushed to the Manhattan hospital but died of complications the next day. Lying on his deathbed, Rothstein refused to give the name of his killer, telling the interrogating policeman, "You stay true to your side, and I will to mine." With Rothstein's death, The Tammany Hall political organisation was severely weakened because it relied on Rothstein to control street gangs. With the fall of Tammany Hall, reform politician Fiorello LaGuardia rose to prominence, and in 1933 he was elected mayor of New York City. 10 years after his death, Arnold, Rothstein's brother, filed for bankruptcy, and Rothstein's estates and wealth were squandered. Frank Erickson, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel and other former associates split up Rothstein's various rackets after his death. Arnold died a few years before the Cosa Nostra was organised. Although still remembered today for his criminal exploits, Rothstein is credited for mentoring the young Charles Luciano and his partner Meyer Lansky. This can be considered the greatest legacy inherited from the criminal world. Rothstein gave Luciano the tools to create Cosa Nostra and assert his power, which, as we have already mentioned, was to be accomplished years after his death.